Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our Secondary Career Pathways Grant webinar for the 24-25 school year and the second year of the 23-25 biennium. As we get started, I want to just briefly introduce and thank my ODE colleagues who will be joining me today for this presentation, Rebecca Amadeo and Sandy Cassio, who you will hear from later on during the presentation. Just for reference, there should be a link to this presentation in the description of the YouTube video that you are watching for reference, and also to have the ability to access any of the links that we will be sharing and referencing throughout the presentation today. We will also make sure there's a copy of the link to this presentation on our Secondary Careers Pathways dashboard through ODE. So with that being said, I'd like to start off today just providing a little bit of information on the intent of the Secondary Career Pathways Grant and what is Secondary Career Pathways in Oregon. So the Secondary Career Pathways Grant came out of House Bill 3072 legislation that was passed in 2015 to help promote additional funding for CTE programs in the state of Oregon. This is a state-provided funding source separate from federal Perkins funding that is intended to help incentivize teachers to promote within their program aspects of student persistence, encouraging students to complete 3 or more credits within a program of study, as well as to help increase access for historically underserved students, as well as incentivizing teachers to provide opportunities for students to earn industry-recognized credentials. As mentioned before, this is funding that is separate and beyond Perkins funding. This is provided specifically from the state. It is a separate state fund program that supports continual improvement in program quality and allows for eligible spending beyond what Perkins allows. So certain areas that Perkins does not allow teachers to spend funding in, Secondary Career Pathways can supplement those costs that are burdens on a lot of our programs of studies. Consumables, things like equipment, technology, professional development for teachers to continue their educational pathway, student participation and CTSO leadership, enrichment for teachers, field trips, bringing guest speakers into the classroom, beyond a lot of allowable purchases from Perkins. Next slide, please. So a little bit more just about Secondary Career Pathway funding. It is awarded as part of the legislative budget. So it is a biennial awarding, and this will be the second year of this current biennium's funding. So there's already been allocations made for the 23-24 school year, and this year there will be new allocations for programs for the 24-25 school year. These funds are awarded to qualifying programs of study that every year of the biennium meet certain requirements to qualify for funding. We'll talk about those qualifications in the next upcoming slide, but it is important to note that only the programs who have earned qualification are the ones allowed to earn this funding. So funding is awarded to individual programs of study, and that funding is only allowed to be utilized by the program of study earning that funding. And all funds for both the 23-24 as well as the 24-25 school year that make up the totality of the biennium must be spent by the end of this upcoming biennium, which will be June 30th, 2025. At this point, I would like to turn over the presentation to my colleague, Rebecca Amadeo, to speak a little bit more to you about qualifying for Secondary Career Pathway funding and the use of data to earn those qualifications.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Amadeo. I am a data analyst for the CTE student engagement data, and I am available to help with determining answers to potential questions you have about the upcoming Secondary Career Pathways Milestone Points Report, and wanted to give an overview of some of the kind of data side aspects of secondary career pathways. The first aspect is reviewing a program for qualifying for disbursement of secondary career pathways funds. In order for that to happen, a program needs to meet all 4 of the following criteria. They report qualifying activity in the report year spring CTE collections. So they have just reported in the most recent CTE student and CTE course collections. 2, the program supported report year students through qualifying secondary career pathways milestones. I'll get to what those are shortly. 3 is that the program must offer at least 3 unduplicated credits and have the approved program of study status in the allocation year. Programs can report and are encouraged to report to the CTE Spring Collections during the years that they are not in an approved program of study status, because they can still use that student experience that they've reported in the future once they are an approved program of study and are eligible for funds disbursement. The 4th criteria is that the school also reports qualifying activity in the allocation year's CTE program update, which would be the following school year. The institution needs to complete their CTE program update for each program. Now I'll talk about the different point types that are accumulated in the secondary career pathways allocation system. There are 3 types of points. One is a program persistence milestone, and that is a program will get 1 point for each student that it has supported through earning 3 or more in-program credits by the end of the report year. This means that students who may not have necessarily had much of their activity or even any of their activity in the most recent report year, if they are still in high school, their previous achievements that the program has supported to them through are eligible for this type of point. The next point type is for a completed industry recognized credential portfolio. And a program for that will get 1 point for each student that they've supported through meeting the complete requirements for 1 or more CTE IRC portfolios in the report year. So a point award there is only available tied to the specific year in which the completion of the portfolio is achieved. And the 3rd type of point is called a promoting equitable participation point. It will be sometimes abbreviated to PEP point, and that is 1 point for the program for each student that the program has supported through at least one of the 2 SCP milestones that I just mentioned, and that student, and for each of those students who are a member of at least one of the following focal groups. If they are economically disadvantaged students, if they're students with disabilities, if they're English learner students, or if they are students identifying as a non-white race or ethnicity. This is a more visual representation of the point accumulation that can be awarded to a program for any given student. First, we're going to look at the student and whether or not they have in-program credit. That in of themselves does not earn a point, so it's just in that outer circle with 0 points. Then there are the 2 milestones represented in the left and bottom interior circles. And it shows that if that student has been supported through at least 3 course credits, 1 point will be awarded. If the program supported the student through a CTE IRC portfolio completion milestone, there will also be a point awarded for that. If both of those things occur for the same student in that report year, then the program will receive 2 points for that given student. There's also an interior circle on the right for the PEP points, the promoting equitable participation. So there's no points for simply having a student within program credit there, but if that student in an underserved population is guided through one of the other milestones, the program will get 2 points. If the student has been supported through both of those milestones, the program will get 3 points. This is a 7-step workflow. It's a very high-level summary of what we do, kind of more behind the scenes at ODE to prepare the allocations. And I'm just presenting this right now to give just an impression that what's happening right now that we're discussing are now steps 3 and 4. We're not quite at the beginning, nor at the end of being ready to allocate or determine the actual funds that will be allocated in the upcoming school year. We are going to have, we at ODE are going to have 2 different validation windows for all of the schools and programs to take a look at their secondary career pathways points awards that have been calculated based on reported program history. That's going to, like I said, there'll be 2 different windows to review the calculations, and each of those windows, called a report validation, is an opportunity to review our results on the ODE side. You can ask for clarification on how to improve your tracking of the reporting or understanding of how we come up with these point amounts, or certainly if you think there's been something incorrectly calculated, I'd be happy to look into that as well. The Secondary Career Pathways Points Report is something that comes from a lot of history in each program and covers information from the CTE program update, CTE student, and CTE course over each year. The report will contain 4 sub-reports, or sorry, 4 number types. There'll be 4 main columns that you will be looking at. There's the count of estimated course credit milestone points, or those persistent points, the count of anticipated completed IRC portfolio points, and the count of anticipated promoting equitable persistence points. Then there will also be a sum of each of those point types to give a total point estimate for that program. I'm referring to them right now as estimates because the data are not entirely final and could potentially be updated, as we'll get to in just a moment. So these validation windows, the first starts Friday, August 30th, 2024, and closes Friday, September 13th, 2024. Then I will check all of the data submitted and make sure that nothing has been updated or added by any institutions in that time. If it is, it will be considered in the next round of calculations, which will become available for that window 2 of 2, which opens Monday, September 16th and closes Monday, September 23rd. This report will be delivered as a Microsoft Excel workbook. All programs with at least 1 point will be in the report, and it will be emailed to CTE regional coordinators and to Perkins Direct recipient CTE grant managers on the open date for each window. To validate or review the Secondary Career Pathways Points Report, first you would need to know your expectations of Secondary Career Pathways point subtotals and total for each program, or at least have a good idea. Then compare those expectations to the values that are showing up on the Secondary Career Pathways Points Report. If everything appears in line, then your validation is actually complete. You don't have to do anything to get back to us or anything like that. Where there are expectations that don't align with the report, you can examine your relevant reporting history to verify, your own expectation. And if that doesn't reconcile things, you can certainly reach out to me as the CTE data analyst. And if you think there are issues that have come up from maybe oversights or incorrect things in the CTE spring collections for the 23-24 school year, there is a list of steps that can be used to update that information. This is a team effort from the data management and processing team at your institution. But the basic steps are: request a reopen of the collections before the close of the respective validation window, prepare any missing or replacement data that will need to be submitted, complete an online application for a reopen of the collection before a cutoff date. That'll be in some guidance we make available, and then coordinate with local colleagues and maybe your SIS rep to prevent repeating data inaccuracy in the future. And once/if, because it's not totally guaranteed, but once the special reopen is approved, complete the data corrections in CTE spring collections for 23-24 during that special window of reopening for your institution. I'll hand it back over to the grant coordinators now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sandy Cassio, and I help with the Secondary Career Pathways grant, particularly in regard to the application process, and can provide technical assistance in that regard, and any other questions that come up regarding the Smart Sheet or technical aspects of the grant. So the calculation of allocations per program follows the process of the points, which Rebecca has outlined thoroughly. Once the points have been established, the dollar value per career pathway point is calculated by dividing the total number of career pathway points into the total available statewide funds. And then the career pathway point dollar value is multiplied by the program points, and that results in the amount awarded by program of study. That total award is a set amount, and so the by program amount will fluctuate depending on the total statewide points. The minimum award per program is $2,000, and the maximum award is $45,000. CTE regional coordinators receive a support grant that is calculated based on the number of programs with their region, $300 per program. The CTE regional coordinator then determines the use of these funds depending on the needs of the region. Next slide. And I'll turn that back to Jeff.
Thank you, Sandy. As we talk a little bit more about the funding awarded and allocated to each program of study, I want to return to the topic mentioned previously about the allowable use of funds. Once again, these funds are state funds meant to be supplemental to Perkins. However, they are only supplemental to Perkins funding. They are not supplemental, and they cannot replace district spending or the responsibility of district that also has already occurred. So if your district is currently providing funding for some of these particular areas. It cannot use Career Pathways to replace the district's current funding for that. And all purchases must be considered reasonable and approved by ODE through the application. But it is important to note that there's a much broader allowance of allowable use for funds coming from Career Pathways comparatively to Perkins. So we talked about before, you can enhance equipment and facilities, focus on recruitment and retention of students into programs of study, expanding work-based learning experiences, enhancing curriculum beyond school district support. It's important to note that districts do provide curriculum development for teachers. So this would not be standard classroom curriculum development that Career Pathways would then pay teacher salary for. However, if a teacher wanted to develop curriculum beyond their standard classroom, such as after-school programs, a week-long spring break camp, curriculum that would be developed intentionally to be used outside of the standard classroom setting, Career Pathways could support that curriculum salary for a teacher. Supplies and materials, especially consumables, oftentimes are utilized from Career Pathways funds, helping students to participate in career and technical student leadership opportunities. Student enrichment, such as field trips or bringing in guest speakers, professional learning or development for teachers and staff, and strengthening alignment with business and industry partners are just a few examples of how Career Pathway funds can be utilized to help support our programs of study. And I'm going to now turn it back over to Sandy to talk about the process of applying for the use of funds allocated to programs.
Thank you, Jeff. The Secondary Career Pathways dashboard is where we have located the resources that you'll need, and you'll find important dates and deadlines and instructions regarding the application process. The dashboard can be accessed through the main CTE Perkins dashboard, or you can just click directly into the link to the Secondary Career Pathways dashboard. So let's click into that and look at just an overview level of what's there. Thank you, Rebecca. So you'll see the year 2 resources are being added and are still, some of these resources are still being developed. On the right, you'll see dates, important dates during this year of the biennium. We'll go through those a little bit later, as well as an illustration of the calculation of points. And on the left side, you'll see a link to this presentation and the slides. So both of those are linked, so you can return to those sources of information. Then linked is an application worksheet, which I will go through in detail in a minute. And then below that is the application itself. Know that the worksheet is useful to draft all of your content, and then from that worksheet, you'll populate the application, which is a Smartsheet form. Below that, you'll see the a link to the Secondary Career Pathways Assurance, which has to be uploaded with your application. And then further down, there are resources that will be useful. Some of them are duplicated here, the worksheet, the application form, as well as some contacts and important data relevant resources. So let's go back to our slides, please. And the application worksheet can be copied so that you can plan your content by program. So if you have 6 programs of study for which you're applying, you will need 6 copies of this document. The first part collects basic information from all participants who collaborate on the application. This demonstrates agreement on the use of funds, and then also would correlate to the signed assurances. Below that, you'll see the budget portion. The budget is per program again, and you'll see administrative cost field where we will be ensuring that that does not exceed the maximum allowable of 5%. The regional coordinator or a designee will complete the smart sheet form, but there will be collaboration on this worksheet, that is assumed. Next slide. The narrative, there are 2 narrative portions. The first narrative portion describes how each participant contributed to the development of the plan. So it's describing that process per program. And then the second narrative portion describes the actual activities and expenditures, how they are supplemental, not supplanting. And that again is per program. Next slide. So in summary, you'll see that the application requires general information, program information, budgeting information, and then the narrative portion, as well as positive impact stories, which are optional, but we do rely on those to tell a story in summary of the impact of the grant. And there is a place to upload the assurances. Let's just click into that link and look at that application briefly. Thank you. So please know that Smartsheet prefers that your content is ready so that as you populate, you'll be able to just go from one field to the next without a lot of interruption. That's the reason for the worksheet. And so you do have drop downs as much as possible for key names and emails and institutions. Please let me know along the way if you see anything in the application that is an obstacle to completing your all of your information. The budget section, some of these fields apply, it's not necessarily the case that every field will apply. It depends on your application. You'll see further down, there are the narrative sections that I described, and then the field for positive impact stories. The box for regional coordinator approved needs to be checked. That's required, as well as the box needs to be checked for the uploading of your signed assurance. And then there is the thank you, that there is the requirement to add your signed assurance where you upload it. So again, let me know if there's a problem with the application, and I'm ready to correct whatever presents any kind of obstacle. We can go back to the slide. And next slide. So key components to keep in mind: the regional coordinator must click the agreement. Applications are due by January 13th, but there's that's a rolling window. So we will start reviewing those as soon as they are submitted, beginning in November, we hope. Funds will be available in EGMs, and that timing will be determined by our procurement office. Spending, all funds for the 23-25 biennium must be spent and items received by June 30th. All claims must be submitted by August 14th, and then our reporting date for the biennium is September 30th. And I'll turn it back to Jeff.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I just want to speak briefly to the role of our regional coordinators in helping support school districts with the Secondary Career Pathways Grant. This is laid out within House Bill 3072, so it's legislatively required that the relay of information for regional coordinators serving as a point of contact. So for districts who will be getting the initial point reports for review, the allocation allotments, helping with the application process, are the ones that need to be the primary contact point for all school districts. As Sandy mentioned before, the application process needs to be collaborative with the programs, including teachers, administrators, superintendents, as well as the regional coordinator. All regional coordinators should approve applications before submitting them to ODE for ODE's final approval. And once again, regional coordinators will assist with the checking of data, helping to identify program of study priorities, and communication on submission of application and following up when those applications have been approved. Once again, the legislation lays out that the determined use of $300 per secondary career pathways program of study is allotted to the institution for the regional coordinator is working for. And we'll go to talk about recommended steps for the regional coordinators. Once again, these are merely recommendations. You'll want to communicate directly with your regional coordinator to determine their current process for secondary career pathways. But we do recommend that regional coordinators decide and document the role of either the regional coordinator or the CTE teacher in terms of entering program information into the Smartsheet application. If changes or edits need to be made after submission, that will be done by the regional coordinator, however. Regional coordinators should inform teachers and their administrators about the grant award, the application requirements, gathering the signed assurance signatures, and making sure that due dates are clearly communicated with all institutions and districts. It's also important for regional coordinators to provide each eligible teacher with a secondary career pathways worksheet to capture all of that information required for the application to make the application submission process as smooth as possible. ODE provides the secondary career pathways worksheet on our dashboard that Sandy just presented. And if desired, develop regionally personalized tools that you can share with your districts and teachers and administrators as well. Let's jump once more to some of those important dates that we looked at here as we're trying to close out this 24-25 year of the biennium. All of these dates have been mentioned previously throughout the presentation, but we just wanted to once again highlight the importance of our career pathways point validation windows, when final allocations should be announced, application due dates. As Sandy did mention, the career pathways application is rolling, however. We will approve applications as they are submitted, so you do not have to wait to January 13th. You can submit those applications as soon as your district and teachers are ready for them to be submitted. It is important to note that June 30th, all funds must be spent and items must be received. This is part of the administrative rule laid out in statute and cannot be changed. So ODE cannot make any exceptions for purchases made after June 30th or where items might not be received until after June 30th. So it's important to note if it looks like you might not get the items received before June 30th, you'll want to change your spending allocation because that is in statute. We cannot change that date. All claims must be made in EGMs by August 14th. Please note that EGIMS does have a closed window for their rollover the fiscal year, and then final reports due to ODE in September. Throughout this presentation, you have been provided a list of a multitude of resources. There's links to all of those resources here on this page. Once again, if you are watching this recording, you should be able to find a link to this presentation slide deck, which will give you access to all of these links in the description of this YouTube video, as well as mentioned before on our ODE dashboard, Secondary Careers Pathways dashboard through ODE. So all of these links should be live and active as you access this presentation to be able to access all of these resources, as well as contact any individuals that need to be contacted. And we're going to skip the next slide since this is not a live webinar and go right to our grant contacts. Once again, my name is Jeff Rose. I am the Secondary Career Pathways Grant Manager. And then you heard earlier today from Sandy Cassio, our CTE Grant and Program Coordinator. For any questions or inquiries or needs involving Secondary Career Pathways, please email both of us. You're welcome to email one and CC the other, but please include us both in all communications involving career pathways. And on the previous resource slide, you should have seen our colleague Rebecca Amadeo's email address as well for any help or support involving CTE data or specifically secondary career pathways data. With that being said, we'd like to thank everybody for your time today. Please reach out to myself or Sandy if you have any secondary career pathways questions, or Rebecca for any questions involving secondary career pathways data. And thank you so much for learning a little bit more about the Secondary Career Pathways Grant, specifically for the 24-25 school year as we wrap up the 23-25 biennium. Thank you again.